This is the Leeds and Liverpool Canal. It is one of the most scenic canals in the British waterway system. It passes through beautiful areas of Yorkshire and Lancashire. They are enjoyed by thousands of people each year, many of them travelling the canal in a self-owned or hired leisure boat. They can be forgiven for thinking that the canal was always the rural idyll that it now appears to be. Leisure boating on the Leeds and Liverpool Canal stretches back over only the last 50 years of the canal's 200 years existence, and in fact, we are lucky to be able to still enjoy it as such. If it hadn't been for the foresight of Barbara Castle, then Minister of Transport in the 1960s, 1,400 miles of non-commercially viable waterways in Britain would have been closed, but she saw their potential as leisureways. But that's another story. This is the story of the Leeds and Liverpool Canal as it was in its commercial heyday. And it is the story of one boat in particular, Kennet. Formerly part of British Waterways' commercial fleet, but now run by the Leeds and Liverpool Canal Society as a floating heritage centre, travelling the length of the Leeds and Liverpool Canal to bring its cargo of heritage to the people that live on or along the canal corridor.
Hello, my name's Mike Clark and I'm the president of the Leeds and Liverpool Canal Society. I've been involved with canals now for 50 years, and when I first became involved it was down in the Midlands where there were all the narrowboats. But coming from up here in the north, I was concerned that our history and heritage of our northern canals was being forgotten. In the 1970s I bought a boat, a little bit like Kenneth here. I lived on board for 5 years in the boatman's cabin. That allowed me to meet a lot of people to do with the canal and to get to know the canal. And so subsequently I wrote the history of the canal, which was published in 1990, and that made a lot more interest developing in the whole canal, its history, its heritage.
I'm Chris Shave, and I've been involved with the Canal Society since 2008. I mainly get involved with moving the boat, which is my love of life, moving boats and being on boats. My parents, fortunately for me, were very keen on the canals and had a strong interest in canals, and we went on a canal boat from about the age of 5 upwards every year at Easter. We saw a business for sale up on the Leeds-Liverpool Canal, and after 4 years of traipsing up and down, we finally bought it. And we developed that into a thriving business, hiring out narrowboats for hire, moorings and a covered dry dock. And then we retired from that after 28 years of running that. All the British Waterways heritage boats were put up for sale or lease. And we saw that, and the Society saw it as an opportunity to take Kennet on. So we leased it for a while, and then we brought it them right for the sum of £1. But if you put it on the open market, somebody would snap it up to convert it into a houseboat, and they'd pay anything up to 40-50 grand for it. But we have said that it won't be sold ever, that if it has to go into a museum at the end, then that's what will happen.
This is Kennet. Kennet is a Leeds and Liverpool short boat. It was built in 1947 by Yardleys of Northwich, and it was in operation from 1947 till the late 1960s.
Kennet is one of the short boats that plied their trade on the Leeds and Liverpool Canal. They're called short boats as opposed to long boats, which could only travel from Liverpool to Wigan due to the change of lock size. They carried between 40 and 50 tons. The boats were originally horse-drawn, sometimes with a square stern which gave a little more carrying capacity. Steam power was introduced in 1879 with the engines built by William Wilkinson of Wigan and diesel engines in the 1920s following an early unsuccessful trial around 1905. Until the 1950s, almost all the diesel engines were built by Widdopes of Keighley. When the canal first opened, limestone was expected to be the main traffic, but coal soon took over. However, the tolls were less than for the general cargoes which Kennet carried, and the canal made as much money from them as from coal. At its peak, The canal carried 2.25 million tonnes of cargo annually.
Well, I've always been interested in canal, and I just like wandering up and down the canal towpath and seeing things, and sort of questioning what's this and what's that, because it's been here like over 200 years, and you think, well, what is it? So I've done a lot of that questioning that, so I'm really interested in the heritage. And then when I joined the society and we got this boat, well, I mean, that were it. I could actually go along the canal on a proper boat and go and have a look at all these different places.
Hello there, welcome aboard Kennet. My name's Richard Williams. They call me Dicky Billy for short. My good friend Mike has already told you about the history of the boat, and I'm going to show you around the inside. But first, I should explain about the clothing that Mike and I are wearing. This is the traditional clothing of a boatman on the Leeds and Liverpool Canal. The jumper that I'm wearing is called a gansey, and on my feet I'm wearing clogs. Additional to this, we could have had a pair of moleskin pants. Together, we call the clothing clogs and gansey. So, now that you know how we're dressed, let's have a look round Kennet. Let's first start with the engine room. As you can see, everything in here is quite cosy. Across the back is the diesel tank. At the right hand corner is the generator, which provides 240 volts for the electric sockets. Round the corner on the right is the battery bank, which supplies the 12 volt DC for the lights. And right in front is the JP3, the 3-cylinder water-cooled Lister engine producing about 30 horsepower. Long stroke pistons, big flywheel, very economical, very reliable. This is connected to the propeller via the gearbox. This is not the original engine, that was a single cylinder from Henry Widdups at Keighley. Now that you know what makes the boat go, let me show you around the hold. From the bulkhead at the back to the bulkhead at the front cabin, this is known as the hold. In this space, the load was transported. Everything from bales of cotton, bales of wool, timber, sacks of sugar, sacks of flour, machinery, limestone chippings, coal, even night soil, in quantities of 30, 40 and possibly 50 tonnes. Today in the hold, we have our displays. This one here is showing the length of the canal, the route that it took, and all the little villages, the towns that matured as the canal progressed. The merchants started to build from Liverpool and from Leeds, but quickly ran out of funds. Some 40 years later, it was completed in 1816 and became the longest canal in Britain, 127 miles long, with 91 locks and rising to 487 feet over the Pennines. It was a huge success. Goods that were leaving Liverpool 1 tonne at a time were now leaving at 40 tonnes a time, and cottage industries expanded to become part of the Industrial Revolution. The boats were horse-drawn. Places such as Bursker, Wigan, Shipley and Blackburn became a hive of activity with stables and warehouses. Demand for coal escalated as cotton and woolen mills developed along the canal. Crossing the Pennines was no mean feat, with 2 tunnels, Fowridge and Gano. The exceptional sequence of locks, namely Wigan Flight and Bingley Rise, made this the M62 200 years ago. Talking of locks, let's have a look how these operate. Let's assume we are sailing into the locks and we're going upstream. You will then close the lock gates and the paddles. Now you can open the ground paddles at the top of the lock, allowing water to enter at ground level, and when the water level rises, you can open the paddles on the top gates. The average rise is about 10 feet. The average water used is 80,000 gallons. That's 2,000 bathtubs full of water, or 40,000 flushes of the toilet. That's double what you would use in your lifetime. When the lock is full, you open the gates and sail away. The 2 big dangers are getting the barge hooked up on the sill, or the barge being caught on the lock gates, especially with Kennet because of its size. The sill is the floor of the canal upstream. On the Leeds and Liverpool Canal, the locks up to Wigan are larger and can take 72 feet long barges, and the locks between Wigan and Leeds can only take a 62-foot barge. Hence Kennet is called a short boat and can travel the full distance. As you can see, the lock gates are closed at an angle, with the weight of water pressing against them, so that all the lock gates in Yorkshire point to Lancashire, and all the lock gates in Lancashire point to Yorkshire. It's just a coincidence that the highest part of the canal is almost on the border between Lancashire and Yorkshire. But this is where the water supply enters the system at the highest point, from Winterburn Reservoir. One way or another, all the excess water on the Yorkshire side finishes back in the North Sea, and on the Lancashire side into the Irish Sea, recycling 200 years ago. Also remember, the whole system functioned without hydraulics or electrics. Well, this is where the bargees would come after an hard day, probably 12 hours, through the scuttle into the front cabin. There was a cast iron stove, a coal fire in one side and an oven on the other. The fire would seldom go out. It was used for boiling water and cooking and for keeping the cabin warm. A pan of rabbit stew was a favourite meal. Flour, sugar, coal would be bartered for a couple of rabbits off porches, and vegetables were available from the fields in the dead of night. 2 bedholes, one either side, and a fold-down table made it a snug accommodation. Behind the table are the storage facilities. The only facilities were a washing up bowl and a bucket for a toilet, known as a bucket and chucket.
Hi, my name's Frida Childs. I'm the chair mum of the Leeds and Liverpool Canal Society. I'm a chair mum because I'm definitely not a chair and I'm not a man. The other trustees said, well, you're the chair mum because you keep us in tow. So I've actually been involved since about 2011, when the Leeds and Liverpool Canal Society actually received their Heritage Lottery Fund. I was just on the committee then because I thought, well, if I'm going to be a waterways widow because my husband would always be away, I might as well join them. We used to have our own boat, so I have helped black the bottom of that and things like that. The chairman actually said he was going to resign in, and the rest of the male said, well, why don't you take over? I was involved in the inside of the hold, and I have also made loads of dressing up clothes for the children to wear when they come on board, with all the costumes that used to be they wear. I've visited quite a lot of places. Preston, the Preston Festival, Liverpool Festival quite a few times, Leeds Festival and the Skipton Waterways Festival. The organisers state that their festival does not start until Kennet arrives round the corner majestically, and that's when it actually starts. Our floating museum can be adapted for theatres. We've had a few theatre groups on. We attended Skipton a couple of years ago for the film festival. We have talks on it, music events. At public events we actually open up to the public so they can come on board, have a look at all the heritage of the canal, and they love the boatman's cabin.
In 1997 I set up the Leeds and Liverpool Canal Society to actually promote the canal from in those sort of areas, the history and the heritage.
The Canal Society are there to promote the canal's heritage and conserve it, and also its well-being.
Before the society, there had been a small fellowship committed to keeping the memory of commercial boating alive and preserving Leeds and Liverpool wide beam boats. The society itself was created to extend this to the heritage of all aspects of the canal. Early activities of the society included continuing the heritage boat meetings, the reinstatement of rollers on canal bridges, the creation of a meadow at Bank Newton, and organising walks along and around the canal towpath. Once the society took ownership of Kennet, much of its activity has been directed to running and maintaining it as an exhibition space. Initially, this involved a full restoration of which the society received a Heritage Lottery Fund grant. Society volunteers worked tirelessly on the inside and the outside of Kennet. They also spruced up the engine room and the boat's cabin. Although less intensive than during the restoration, Kennet still requires a lot of maintenance. Each season we try to give it a fresh look. This prepares Kennet for the season and for its appearance at canal festivals and open days, which form the core of the Society's work with Kennet.
The Society's got just under 200 members, and at the moment their financial contribution is very important for keeping Kennet on the water. Kennet costs about £5,000 each year to maintain. In a previous year we would raise a large amount of that by collecting money when we operate at open days and at canal festivals.
Since its restoration in 2011-2012, Kennet has welcomed some 50,000 visitors on board. Kennet's role in bringing knowledge of both the historical role and contemporary value of the canal is widely appreciated by the communities that it visits. In 2016, the Society worked closely with the Canal and River Trust to commemorate the bicentenary of the first full crossing of the Leeds and Liverpool Canal. Kennet led a flotilla of boats from Leeds to Liverpool over 8 days. The flotilla was greeted by large crowds all along the way. Members of the Society involve themselves in the Society's activities for a variety of reasons. The work of the Society with Kennet has been recognised widely. Most recently, its work engaging communities was recognised with the UK National Historic Ships Registers Marsh Award.
The awards that we've actually won are very important to us because it highlights to others the actual work that the volunteers have done on, especially Kennet, to fetch it up to the standard it is now. One of the awards we won from the Canal and River Trust was for volunteering and also working with the communities. The one that we won from the National Historic Ships was just unbelievable. To give it to a canal boat and not a ship, that was one of our best ones, and it's a flag that is flown in the hold.
In recognition of his individual contribution, one of the locks at the Bank Newton flight has been named after the Society's president, Mike Clark. This was presented by Richard Parry, CEO of the Canal and River Trust.
I'm Richard Parry, Chief Executive of the Canal and River Trust, the national charity that cares for 2,000 miles of our inland waterways, including the Leeds and Liverpool Canal. We know how important it is that local people get the opportunity to engage and connect with the local history and heritage on their doorstep, so they can really appreciate the benefits of their local canal. That's why the work of the Leeds and Liverpool Canal Society and their boat Kennet plays such a vital role. By moving the boat along the canal to support events and festivals, engage with local communities, local schools and other groups, the Society really helps people to appreciate the value of what they have on their doorstep. It's great to work in partnership with the Leeds and Liverpool Canal Society to support their work, to see them go from strength to strength in helping people really appreciate what they have in their communities up and down the length of this wonderful canal to enjoy now and in the future.
Next year, hopefully, we'll be able to start going to festivals again and things like that. But hopefully in years to come, we will be able to regenerate what we've lost this year and fetch the heritage to the communities again and try and update what we've actually got on board.
It's the heritage of the canal, to try and keep that alive. Obviously folk are passing away and all the heritage is being lost, so we try and capture that, get it in the archives for future generations. Obviously we open up to the public. I don't mind mixing with public and talking to them, one thing and another. I've boated for 40 odd years, maybe more. It's just a natural progression to sort of give something back to the canal after all these years.
And also, it's bringing the heritage to kids, to schools, to any sort of groups, festivals. It's been brilliant and I really, really enjoy it.
We'll be there with Kennet and we very much welcome people on board. Come and have a look. You'll get an opportunity to see how a heritage boat, a historic boat, used to carry its goods along the Leeds and Liverpool Canal.
At the Leeds and Liverpool Canal Society, we are dedicated to passing down the history of the canal to future generations. particularly through our use of the heritage boat, Kennet.